Here we are. The broadcast is live from downtown Ames, Iowa, at the worldwide headquarters of YSS 420 Kellogg, the Jacobson Youth and Family Center. My name's Andrew Allen, President and CEO of YSS, but my most important title is alumnus. And here with one of my greatest personal and professional mentors, all the way from Bloomington, Indiana, on his way to Cincinnati, the one, the only Dr. George Belitsos, our founder, and a guy that I'm really excited to spend the next half hour or so with interviewing. George, how are you?
I am great. I am on my way to Cincinnati, as you mentioned. I'm going to spend the weekend with my elderly aunt and uncle, and I'm going to take them to church. This is the weekend of the Eastern Orthodox Easter, so this is Easter weekend. And they wouldn't be able to get to church or really celebrate Easter unless I'm there because they can't drive.
Well, you're definitely a family man. I think I shared with you a photo earlier this week in preparation. Your mom and dad were here,
Yes.
right outside my window 26 years ago, in short order when YSS did the ribbon cutting on this building. So it's been a family affair. I still sometimes send thank you notes for checks that I receive from your family from the East Coast.
Yeah, well, my brother, three younger brothers, and I decided to raise the money for the Icarus Fountain, and that was $50,000. And the Icarus Fountain is to commemorate. If you look at the stone underneath the structure, the bronze structure, you'll see that it's called the Helen and Peter Belitsos Family Fountain. So it was a family effort.
It's a beautiful fountain. You know, it's a magnet. It attracts a lot of people, mostly kids and families. And so I'm just so honored to sit in this chair in your office that you held down for 39 and a half years. Of course, it wasn't all in this building, but the fountain is indicative of the way that YSS connects with the community. And I love opening my window and hearing the kids out there splashing in the water. It's one of our greatest assets, and so grateful for your family for thinking about that 26 years ago. And it'll be running soon.
It happened to coincide with the 50th anniversary of my parents' wedding. So we unveiled it, and it was a surprise to them.
Wow, it's impressive. We don't have it on the slideshow, but I actually have a photo. Here they are. If you can see this,
yes.
Jan Barron. There's the fountain. Your mom and dad.
Yep, and there's Icarus.
And there's Icarus, and here's the designer, the Greek designer.
Yes, Lefteris Karkadoulias, and he's a Greek American who does all bronze sculpturing, and he was a friend of the family.
Well, today is a big day. As you well know, we are 45 days away from our 45th anniversary as an organization. Did you ever imagine that what you dreamt probably more than 50 years ago would be around to see the 45th anniversary of the incorporation?
You have to have a dream to make a dream come true. And it's always been my dream to be of service to youth, troubled kids. It's what brought me to Ames to begin with from Cincinnati. And I did have a vision. I knew what it was I wanted to do, but I never thought it'd get this big and we'd have such a successful person succeed me, Andrew, who'd been right through our own program. I'm so proud of you and grateful to you for carrying on the mission of YSS.
It's an honor. I mean, really, George, it's an honor to sit in this seat, to interview you, to be in this position. Never in a million years did I think I would go to work for the agency that saved my life. It just rolls off my tongue because it feels so right. You grew me. You know, you not only created the program that provided the treatment that saved my life, but then you took a special interest in me, like you, I'm sure, took in thousands of kids over your tenure and continue to do today. And you gave me opportunity. YSS is built on a foundation of youth development, right?
Yes.
Before people were talking about positive youth development, before it was evidence based, you knew how important it was to take young people, um, ask them what they
Yes.
think, give them leadership opportunities, and I am a demonstration of that. You did that for me. You put me on committees. You asked me to volunteer. You asked me to speak. You asked me to do a lot of different. You nominated me for awards. You put me on your board of directors. You created the person that I am today, and I'll be forever grateful.
Oh, thank you. And I'm very proud of you. 25 years clean and sober. There aren't many that can boast that record. I'm so proud of you, and you're carrying on the YSS mission and the youth development philosophy as only someone who has been through the program could do. It's in your bones.
I share it with the kids that graduate our residential addiction treatment program on each occasion. You came to my graduation.
Right.
You shared some encouragement. I made it my commitment to do the same when I took this role. And I tell all of them, if they stay sober a day at a time, in 20 or 25 or 15 or 30 years, when I retire, they could succeed me and or go on to do much greater things. I love this organization. I love the work that we're doing. I love the stories that I hear on a regular basis of alumni who have passed through the doors of YSS, been impacted, and then come back in various forms. They come back as volunteers. They
Yeah.
come back as employees. And one of the coolest things is they come back as donors. So to
Uh,
go from a kid who needed support and services as a youth to be in a position where you've got disposable income and you want to invest it back in the organization that provided support is like probably as cool as it gets.
I'll second that and say that you are the role model that these kids need.
Thanks, George. All
You're,
right,
you're
so here we are, 45 days
yeah.
out, 45th anniversary. We've got a lot of things to cover. I want to encourage people to go to yss.org. It's the easiest URL out there. I was actually on the board when we reserved that before URLs were a big deal. And if you just hit /45th anniversary, you're going to see a lot of different activities that we're going to be talking about through the night. We encourage people to get a magnet, which we'll talk about in a little bit. We've got an opportunity for you to share your YSS story. We've got bingo cards, and we've got an event coming up on June 10th, socially distanced hybrid, so you can come in person or we can do it online. But I really, George, wanted to take this time to dig in and just spend some time picking your brain, talking about your YSS story,
Yeah.
and learning what really precipitated the founding of YSS more than 45 years ago.
Well, I was looking for graduate school. I have 2 degrees from University of Cincinnati, and I had been working for the university YMCA on campus with youth in the local community. And my director at the Y, when I graduated with my second degree, and I was looking to go to graduate school, he told me about Iowa State. He had connections here, and they had a campus Y, and he said you could get a job there. Also, I was looking for a job that could count as alternative service as a conscientious objector, and they had that. So I came to Iowa State. I checked out the graduate school. I applied. I got in. Had a job ready for me. I lived at Alumni Hall on campus. That was the campus YMCA. And my assignment was the very same assignment that I had at the University of Cincinnati, which is work with the teens and the young people in the neighborhood around the university, and find out why so many of them are getting in trouble, they're getting arrested, they're in jail. There are a lot of runaways. There's a lot of high risk drug abuse, and I that was what I did. So I'm going to classes during the day, and at night, I spent the first month in Ames just getting to know the young people, talking to them. And what I observed was a shock. I thought I was coming to a small town in a rural state, which is what Iowa was, but I was seeing very high risk behavior by these young people. There were a lot of runaways. And back then, this is now before we founded YSS, and it led to YSS. Um, uh, the uh, the young people that I was seeing were from all over Iowa, and they're coming to Iowa State for food, for a place to stay, to get drugs.
Wow.
And they were on Welch Street Avenue. Just before I came there, the police were being harassed by the kids, and the police were starting to make threats, and they were arresting kids. And the new courthouse in Story County was filled with runaways. They had three jail cells for runaways, and they were all filled. And so I suggested to the YMCA on campus, the board, and it was led by Father Paul Goodland, who had the Episcopal Church in Campus Town, and he had kids sleeping in the church at night. And so I knew that we needed a shelter for these runaway kids. Back then, Andrew, it was so different for the runaways because not only were there a lot of runaways and they were doing high risk things, using drugs they had no real knowledge of, flipping out on LSD, bad trips.
Wow.
Just before I got there, an incident took place that really told the story. So some of the kids who were runaways broke into a shoe store on Welch Street Avenue. I forget the name of the store. They didn't get much money. The police were called, and they saw the kids running down the back parking lot. They pulled out their guns, and one of the kids was shot in the back and killed.
Wow.
Running away. It was a teenager. And the next night there was a riot, the first riot on Welch, and this is going back to the early 70s. People think the Visha riots, first riots. No. One of the police cars was set on fire in Campus Town. So this was the environment that I was arriving at, and people were looking at me for solutions. So the first thing I did is I said, you know what these kids need, we need to draw them away from Campus Town because it was so tense there. And I said, we need to have a drop-in center. We need to have kids away. And I organized a couple of the kids. I made them the advisory committee. I am a true believer in positive youth development. And back then we didn't call it positive youth development. But that evolved later in the 80s. But I just knew that kids had a lot to offer to solving their own problems.
Yep.
And so I wanted to pick their brain, and they really liked the idea of having a drop-in center. They wanted to make it a coffee house like they had on campus, which they weren't allowed to go to.
Yep.
And they said, we don't want anyone over 18 to come in. And I said, yeah, but how are you going to manage it if it's all kids? And they said, no holding, no using, no dealing of drugs.
The three rules.
I went to the Y. I said, I want to rent someplace and we'll draw the kids away from campus town. And they said, okay, raise the money. We don't have any money for that. So I talked to a couple of parents, and we raised enough money for to pay rent for a month. And I
Wow.
found this place called Lincoln Swing, right next to King's Restaurant, which is now the community bank, right on the corner of Lincoln Way, the main street in Ames, and next to the bus depot.
Sure.
And I wanted the kids to name it, come up with a name. Kids are great at that. And they came up with the bus stop. It was near the bus depot where a lot of kids arrived or left,
Yep.
including runaways. And so it was a really good location. And this guy, his name was Sterling Klink. He owned the gas station right next to the building. And he couldn't get anyone to rent the basement. It was huge. It was 8 rooms, and
Wow.
2 of them were huge rooms. And I said, I have very little money. I have $75. He took it.
Wow.
And that was the rent. And he kept it that rent because he really was one of these guys that really was concerned with what was happening in campus town.
Wow.
So he wanted to help. And the bus stop opened, the kids ran it. We had a organic food bar. Organic food was real big then.
Wow.
They built a stage. All of a sudden, big speakers arrived. I don't know where they came from. And we had a coffee house going.
Wow.
And they painted on not the door, but the wall next to the door as you entered the bus stop, no holding, no using, no dealing, no one over 18 except myself. And who did I have? I didn't have any help. So I got my classmates. And the head of the psychology counseling program, and also she was the head of the counseling service at Iowa State. Her name was Dr. Phyllis Miller. God bless her. She was like the grandmother of YSS. She allowed the volunteer work that they were doing at the center to count toward their classwork.
Wow.
Like internships. So I had 8 students working there, and we were open 7 nights a week till 10 o'clock every night. That drop-in center was a huge success. One of the things that I did is I sent some of the graduate students to a program in St. Louis that trained people on how to help those who were on a bad trip.
Okay.
We called it Acid Rescue.
Wow.
We had
Parents,
friends, kids driving from all over Iowa to acid rescue in the bus stop in Ames on Lincoln Way. And, we had counselors who knew how to help these kids to talk them down. And it was, the place.
It was a trip. Oh no, I shouldn't.
Yeah, it was a trip. But we, every night when we would close, there were kids that had nowhere to go.
Wow.
So I told the YMCA board, the campus board, that we needed to open a shelter for these kids. And I did not realize there was no youth shelter in the state of Iowa. There was no license for it. There was no funding for it.
Right.
They said, well, you're taking a big step here. It's already a high risk thing that you're operating. And if you'll find the down payment, we'll go ahead and buy a house and put it under the Y. So I found a lady who was willing to put the down payment on a house that we found on Douglas Avenue. And then we bought it, and then the neighbors all squawked because they heard it was going to be the shelter. No one had heard of a shelter. So the Y board had an emergency meeting and they decided they needed to get out. Well, remember, Father Paul Goodland was the chair of the Y board. So I was very disappointed, and I had raised the money, found the house, but the neighbors didn't want us. So Father Paul Goodland, God bless him, he had these kids sleeping in his church. He knew there was a need. He said, "You know what? I'll give you the go ahead to buy a house, and don't tell the board, don't tell anybody where it is."
These
And
are the deals you were working on in the early 70s to create the
yeah,
foundation for YSS. Impressive.
and that is when we found the Burnett house.
Now I'm going to show a picture here. Here's a
Yeah.
flyer from the bus stop.
Yeah, there's a bus stop. The kids produced a newspaper called the Saturday Evening Bust. Back then, there was a Saturday Evening Post. And the kids just need a way to, there it is, Saturday Evening Bust. Yeah. That tabloid grew to be 16 pages.
Wow.
All written by youth. They really needed an outlet to express themselves. So we opened the bus stop. We were still running the bus stop, and I found a couple from Iowa State. They were married, and in exchange for a free place to live, they were the Night House parents.
And this was 712 Burnett, the original shelter house.
Yes, the original house. Oops, there it is.
I've got my handy dandy 35th anniversary book, so I've got all the things in here.
The first runway, it was all run by volunteers and the Night House parents that weren't paid, and it just went gangbusters. We were full all the time. I remember the very first kid, the very first night. She was actually a runaway from Ames, and her friends brought her in. She was afraid to go back home. That young lady, then through counseling, we got her back home. She not only needed a lot of therapy and counseling, but so did her parents.
Yeah.
And they were a success story. And in fact, their family had a florist business in Ames, and when her parents retired, she took it over and ran the business.
Wow.
She just retired recently.
I think I know that story.
Yes.
She may be family that works at YSS.
Yes. This is so in the course of the years that followed that shelter house, that was the name originally, and then it changed to Rosedale Shelter. That's how it opened. But how did YSS start? Well, after we opened,
and for the folks listening,
found out that we were doing this.
I was just going to say, for the folks listening, like, things don't happen overnight. There are, many key moments in YSS's history that allowed us to get to where we are today. But all of what George is describing happened before 1976, before we were incorporated as an organization. This was your fledgling time.
So the board of the Y said, this is too high risk. We don't want to run a youth business in the community. We're a campus Y. Right. We were just, so they wanted to cut us off. And they said that they weren't even going to give us any financial support or anything. In fact, they said, you need to pay us back for the $33,000.
Wow. Which was
to the house. Yes. So it came this close, Andrew, this close to giving up and throwing in the towel. But I turned to a few of the board members and said, let's form our own corporation, 501c3. One of them was a lawyer, and let's form a board. And Bob Stewart, he was the head of the new computer science department at Iowa State.
All right.
I had actually worked with one of his kids, and he was a believer in the shelter, and the shelter is just starting. But I also had worked with him at bus stop. So what happened was he said, "I'll be the board president, and uh, I'll get the attorney on the board to apply for the 501c3." And I went to the kids and I asked them to come up with the name. They came up with the Youth and Shelter Services.
Wow.
That's where the name came from, just like the bus stop. And so uh, we wrote our bylaws. We got the 501c3. We raised the 33,000 to pay off the Y. And even though that it wasn't their money, we raised the money, but they wanted it back. The Y subsequently closed. Alumni Hall was sold to the university. So that's how YSS got started. It was because some people believed in us, and we had this one of a kind going. We had no insurance, no license, all volunteer run.
Yeah, it's impressive. It's a great story, George. I love to hear it. I learn something new every time you tell it. Shelter House then turned into Rosedale, and for those that don't know the story of Rose and Dale McKay, they were some of our greatest benefactors for many years. And later this summer, July 15th, we'll have the McKay Impact Awards that celebrate so many different success stories across YSS. We'll do it live and in person on almost your birthday and Rose McKay's birthday. So love to celebrate that every year. One of my favorite stories, George, about Rosedale is apparently, this is the way that I heard it. You had you needed some money for something, and Dale
I
McKay,
always needed money.
right? George always needs money. Dale McKay in a board meeting said, "You know what, George, I'm happy to give you 5,000." And you said, "Oh, that's fantastic. You know, thank you so much for $5,000." This is the story that his son Doug told me. "Thank you so much for $5,000." And he said, "No, not $5,000. 5,000 shares of
Yes.
Pioneer stock, of course, which was probably the largest gift that we'd received at the time." And they
For
became
sure.
the namesake for the shelter. So many different key turning points in our history. One of the things that you used to say all the time, and I'm sure still do, is, this is about turning scars into stars. Barry Griswold, the CEO at Principal Financial Group, when I was there, wrote a book called The Adversity Paradox.
Yes.
I think about people that experience adversity and push through it as actually having a stronger foundation and being more successful maybe than those that don't. So we know many of the stories. Talk about some turning points or some things that, some key moments in our history. Sometimes we talk about seconds and inches, but key things that happened in YSS's history to help us be the agency that we are today.
There are a lot of turning points, but the one that really made a difference between us being just this maverick startup program that could have fallen apart. We were hanging by a thread financially, and then something happened. So I'll tell you a story really quick, and made all the difference. It was the death of a kid in a detention center. It was in Marshalltown. And this particular kid, I like to keep his name alive. His name was Dean Burskins. He was 15 years old. He had run away from home 2 or 3 times, and he had let his hair grow long, and they suspected he was smoking marijuana, but he hadn't broken any laws. And he was placed in jail. And back then you could place a teenager in jail, even in next to a jail cell with an adult.
Yeah. And you helped, that's illegal today. You helped ensure the implementation of that.
What happened to Dean actually not only led to YSS becoming what it is today, it was the springboard for the legislature to change the law. Right. So that status offenders status, meaning because of their status as teenagers, that they could be put in jail or they could be found delinquent even though they haven't broken any laws. And so all of that was done away with after Dean Erskine's death. So what happened was we were full all the time at the shelter. We were a new 501c3, new organization. We had no line of funding. It was, we were having a rough time. Deans, they called me, and I happened to answer the phone that day from Marshalltown. We were full. They had this kid, and they said he's depressed, and the sheriff wants him out. Heard about your shelter. We would like to take him there. And I said, we don't have room, but he sounds like exactly the kind of kid that could benefit from being in our program. We'll make room on a couch, so bring him tomorrow. And the next day was a Saturday. The phone call was on a Friday. And what happened is that the kid never got to our shelter house because the probation officer was to transport him, got busy with another case. And they had told the kid they were going to take him to the shelter, and then and then they told him, no, he's not going. And so he hung himself in the jail cell that night. But the thing that happened that is so remarkable is he wrote a letter, a note with like a magic marker or something that showed up on the wall. And it was basically to the people of Iowa saying, this is right. This is right. And I shouldn't be in jail. My parents should be in jail, things like that. There just happened to be someone from the Des Moines Register who followed the ambulance, and they went into the detention, well, actually the jail.
Right.
All been torn down and is long gone. Anyway, it is, and he saw the note on the wall, and they were trying to resuscitate this 15-year-old kid. He took it and he put it in the front page of the next day's paper. And he had heard that the kid was supposed to come to YSS, and the headline was, I think it said, dead. Yeah, there it is. Dead youths move halted by red tape. Yeah. And all of a sudden we were on the front page of the paper. The next day at the Register, the next day was in the front page of the Ames paper. Yes. Dead Marshalltown youth might have been in Ames shelter house Monday. All of a sudden we became like the hometown solution to the youth problem. And we had no funding from United Way.
Yeah.
We had no funding from the court. We had no grants. So, we were hanging by a thread. So the following day, it was a Monday afternoon, I had a call from Robert Ray. And I had only seen him on TV.
The governor.
But I recognized his voice. It was his voice. It wasn't his secretary. And he said, I read about your shelter. I would like to come and visit. And I will come with my wife, Billy. And there he is. Next to him is our legislator who had never been in the shelter. And on the other side was the head of United Way. And I had the judge there. I had the probation officer. All of them were there to greet the governor when he arrived a couple of days later with his wife, Billy.
Sure.
And, they were all taking credit for the program, which was fine with me. I don't care who takes the credit as long as they, bone up and give us some support. And Immediately after that, we were under United Way. The juvenile court judge ordered that we get funding for the shelter.
Wow.
Robert Ray met with the kids privately, heard their stories, was very moved, had a press conference, and announced that runaways are no longer going to be held in jails and detention centers.
That's right.
And the whole juvenile code was changed with the support of League of Women Voters. A bunch of different groups got behind it. There was, and here he was a Republican conservative governor, but he was a humanitarian. And then he said, "Hey, I'm going to get you a grant. There's this law assistance administration fund, and we have this would be an alternative to jail. You file it, I'll make sure you get funded." And we got $50,000.
Wow.
From LEAA, Law Enforcement Assistance Administration. Who would have ever thought? And he not only led the charge on changing the code, and it happened within a year. And then shelters started, everyone was coming to us, looking at us as the model.
That's right.
Mean, that one kid's death and the fact that we had a governor who picked up the phone and said, I want to look at this, I want to hear about this, and made these changes. And he did so much for me. Then he put me on the Iowa Crime Commission.
Right.
I was the only one that had any juvenile justice background. I got them to change the whole thing from Crime Commission to Criminal and Juvenile Justice Department or Planning Department. Andrew, I think many years later, you have served on that advisory board, right?
I'm the current chair, George.
Yeah, okay, better yet.
You nominated me for award. They put me on the committee, and now I'm the chair. So your legacy looms large there. It does across the state. I say it regularly. I believe you are Iowa's greatest friend to children. So many things could have been different in the state of Iowa had it not been for the vision of George Belitsos and the way that you pulled together this organization, YSS. We talk about having three uniques. What differentiates YSS from other organizations? And the three things that I talk about most is, number one, we're comprehensive. So
yes.
from even in utero, family moms that are pregnant, we're teaching them how to ensure that those kids, once they're born, are taken care of. All the way up to the mid-20s. Many youth-serving agencies stop serving kids at 18, but from infancy to independence, we are as comprehensive a youth development agency as exists. We are collaborative, and every nonprofit says that. Yeah. But man, you built, I sent you a note recently and just thanked you for your vision as it relates to the Iowa Aftercare Services Network.
Yes, thank you.
We lead a statewide network that provides services for kids up to 5 years after they age out of foster care. And we don't do it all YSS. We've got 7 subcontracted partners because we know that in Cedar Rapids or the Quad Cities or Council Bluffs, where we don't have a presence, it would be better to partner with a local youth serving agency who knows where the services are. So we're collaborative in a way that I feel like makes it a win-win. And the final is community-based. And that's been your philosophy. It continues to be our philosophy. We are part of the communities where we operate. We have local directors. We have local advisory boards. Sometimes I feel like people think it's unwieldy. I've probably got more than 100 board members that I inherited from you. All right? It feels unwieldy, but it is our secret sauce. We have folks who champion our work in the local communities, from Mason City to Des Moines, from Boone to Marshalltown, and Webster City and Nevada, and of course our headquarters here in Ames. So I'm grateful every day for the seconds and inches, those things that really impacted the trajectory of this organization, because it was there for me when I needed it, right, in 1995, desperate, hopeless, headed towards jail or worse. And I got the right treatment at the right time, at the right intensity, and it continued right well into my, graduate high school and college and professional career, and then here today. George, two more questions. I think I had 10 to start, and you said, Andrew, we'll make it through
Yeah,
10. You're right. You only got through two. Two more questions. I want to know, is there a favorite memory that you have? And then I'd like for you to talk about your hope for the organization for the next 45 years. So a favorite memory.
Oh, there are so many. Gee. Wow. Yeah, here's one. One of many. The shelter was just a couple of years old. Robert Ray had been there, and people were coming from all over the state wanting to open shelters. That's what really got us to go with the idea with community base. They all wanted us to come and open a shelter in their community. And what we did is we kept, we said, we'll consult, we'll help you. YESS in Des Moines, we helped them get started. So I was away a lot, helping other communities to get their own programs started and to link up with local youth service agencies, which were, organizations that had been there for a long time, and they were siloed. They were doing one thing, like residential treatment.
Sure.
So this was broadening them. And so anyway, I was gone a lot. So the staff started kicking kids out of the program when they misbehaved. And back then, they really had nowhere to go. So they would be actually ending up in detention and charged with other things.
Yeah.
So there was this kid that I had come to know, and I had been gone a lot, and they were going to kick him out, and I just knew that was wrong. And I had just come back, and I put the veto on it, and they were all mad at me. And so 2 days later, this same kid, and he was a loud kid, very obnoxious in many ways. He swore a lot. He was, he was not a kid that it was easy to be around. He was very hard. So anyway, 2 days later, he saved a woman's life.
Wow.
Next door to the shelter house was an apartment building. It was all old women, single women. Husbands had died. They were all living there, and they had a garden in the back. It's now a parking lot, and it was a big garden. And one of the ladies was back there, and she had a stroke and fell to the ground, and nobody knew she was laying there.
Wow.
And she was crying, and she was close to death. And he was outside the house. He was not allowed to leave the grounds, but he heard her crying. Nobody else did.
Wow.
And he broke the rules, and he went into the neighbor's yard, and he found her. And he actually, in his own way, tried to give her mouth to mouth.
Wow.
And of course, the other kids were pointing, oh, he left, he went over to the other yard. And so the staff came out, and they called 911. I don't even know if we had 911 back then.
Probably not.
Anyway, they called the police, and she was taken away by ambulance. And the word got around, not only in the neighborhood, but the whole town, that this kid saved a life.
That's a great story.
And that kid, after that point, was so popular and so highly thought of, he changed his whole behavior.
Wow.
I used to work out on the streets, Andrew. The kids used to say, if you got the name, you may as well play the game. So if they call you prostitute, you may as well do it. If they call you burglar, you may as well do it. If you call you a druggie, you may as well do it. Well,
Mm,
he had all those labels, but he wasn't those things. And he just needed for people to see him differently. And
yeah.
then 12-hour people, the whole town, 12-hour period, the whole town knew this kid was someone who saved an old lady's life. Now that's one of many examples I can give you of memories that I have that mean so much to me.
It's a great story. I don't know if you know what our promise is, but we have a promise or a guarantee as an agency, and it is that we meet kids where they're at. And the way that we've described it is we believe in your potential, we promise to meet you where you're at, and we'll invest in your future. And so here's the thing, you can see the good in every kid. Plenty of people had given up on me and had decided that I was not going to amount to much. And you saw potential, you invested in me, you believed in me more than I believed in myself. I'll be forever grateful. George, I'm reminded of a quick story of a young girl who was in our residential addiction treatment program. They had snuck out because we don't lock the doors. They'd done some things that people were talking about around town. It got to a board member. The board member came to me and said, people are talking about not wanting to give to YSS because of the behavior of this young girl. I felt fearful and threatened, and that I had to do something, right, to rein in these kids. And we got through that bumpy period. And 2 months later, I'm at a graduation for a young girl, and I take them breakfast before graduation and just encourage them and find out about their experience. And I said, tell me more about when you came in. And she said, well, I really want to be here. And you probably heard about some of the stuff that I had done. And I didn't know what she was talking about. And I said, well, what happened? You seem, well-adjusted. You want to be sober. You've obviously had a transformation. Tell me more about what happened. And she said, well, there was that one time that we snuck out and got in trouble. And I keyed into, now I know who this girl is.
Okay. Oh.
I said, tell me more, because this created significant strife for me as the leader of the agency, with a board member saying, your kids are out of control. I said, tell me more. She said, well, I did that. And, I didn't know exactly what was going on. And we got caught and in trouble. And I said, well, is that what turned? She said, no. And she said, well, then we got pulled into the at first I denied it. I said, we weren't doing anything. But then it sat on me for a day and I started to feel guilty. And the next day I went into my counselor's office and I just fessed up. Wow. And as soon as I fessed up, my attitude hasn't been the same since. Wow. Everything changed. My perspective is different. I started doing what the program told me. And I sat there and just realized that this difficult situation that had boiled up to the point of a board member asking me and me fearful about a specific program was in fact the moment that transformed this girl's life.
Yeah.
And so the adversity paradox is real. I'm so grateful that you have not given up on any kids. I encourage everybody that's watching. This has gone 48 minutes now, but I could spend another 48 minutes talking about YSS and the history. Here's the thing. We can't give up on kids. There is so much trauma happening right now in the midst of a global pandemic. So much isolation, so much anxiety and depression. And YSS has more than 300 staffers who are working every day to create hope and opportunity through addiction treatment and through counseling and therapy and, psychiatry and prevention services and child welfare services and transitional services. There's almost 40 programs. We should probably get to 45 for our 45th. I bet if we broke some of them, we could come up with 45. George, in the next 60 seconds, tell us what your hope is for the next 45 years for YSS.
Well, for one thing, I hope that the leadership continues and that you remain as CEO until your retirement. That's a wish I have for you and for the agency, because you have the mission, and like I said earlier, it's in your bones, and you understand youth development. And the story you just told, one of your many stories about believing in kids and their potential. That's what YSS is all about. So my hope for the future is that we continue to have a leader that will carry on that important mission and that important philosophy. It is unique among youth serving agencies.
You're going to make me cry. I don't always get emotional, but this is in my bones. It's in my blood.
Yeah.
This isn't an easy job. Some days, the pressure is great. The responsibility is huge, but the opportunity is just awesome. This is one of my favorite photos. I've shared it with you, George. If you can blow up the screen, Matt.
Oh, yes.
This is George and I. We're looking really
Yeah.
excited to be there. You can't really see it because of the glare. We're speaking at an event, likely at the Knoll. But look at that sign behind us. This was 25 years ago, and here at George, past, Andrew, future. So this was a premonition of sorts.
Yes.
There's just story after story of seconds and inches, the way that things came together. I'm excited to have been in this role almost 6 years. It's hard to believe. Can you believe you've been retired for almost 6 years, George?
No, I can't. It seems like yesterday.
Well, you stay active in the community. You continue to volunteer. You're a mentor for YSS. You're active on the human trafficking Network Against Human Trafficking and the Tobacco Commission. You do a lot. You continue to serve this community. We're grateful every day for all that you do. Your legacy looms large here, and I didn't fill your shoes. I bronzed them and I put them off in the corner because your shoes are not capable of being filled. I appreciate the foundation. I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity with you tonight, for you to stop in Bloomington on your way to Cincinnati to spend an hour with us. I want to remind folks of our 45th anniversary. Today is the start of a 45-day countdown. And we've got these awesome magnets that go on cars. So we hope to plaster them all over Central and North Iowa. If you are a supporter of YSS, get one of these. You go to yss.org/45th anniversary to learn more. There you can also share your story. So your YSS story. We've got bingo card. So there it is. Get your phone, record a brief message addressing how you became connected to YSS, what YSS means to you, any words or comments to share with staff or donors or investors in YSS. So do that. We're going to put together a collage at the end. I think it'll be really impressive, and we want your voice heard. YSS means a lot to many people. YSS.org/mystory. Another activity, we've got these bingo cards. If you go to YSS.org/45th anniversary, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 25 slots. You can go for blackout or just regular bingo. And these are activities related to YSS or maybe just acts of kindness. So ways for you to get your family engaged in serving the community and thinking about others, putting service above self. And on our 45th anniversary, apparently there are prizes for bingo too. So get your bingo cards submitted and win a prize, earn an award. George is very good at giving awards. It's a great way to recognize people's commitment. In addition, on our 45th anniversary, I'm just really excited to launch a campaign to create 1 million intentional and substantial connections across the communities that we serve over the next 5 years, in a time where we have been disconnected from others. Connections are so important. The reason that I am where I am today is because I had people like George believing in me more than I believed in myself. And so we're going to launch a campaign for 1 million intentional connections. The tagline is making connections, building futures. That sounds like something George would have come up with, or a young person that George would have asked. And we can't wait to celebrate the anniversary. George, I hope you're able to make it. I hope all the past board members and committee members and donors are able to come. Again, we'll be socially distanced 4 to 6 at June 10th downtown. Look for your invitation soon. George, thank you for your time. Thank you for your commitment and your vision. God bless you for being Iowa's greatest friend to children. Have you got any final words?
I wouldn't miss that 45th anniversary. It's on my calendar. I'll definitely be there. And happy birthday, Andrew, and all of YSS, and all the volunteers, all the staff, all the kids. God bless you.
Thank you so much. Godspeed, safe travels. Next week, join us 7 p.m. YSS Let's Talk live on Facebook. We're going to talk about play therapy. We've got several play therapists, licensed play therapists that work with kids as young as 2 or 3 years old across each of our behavioral health clinics in Ames and Webster City and Boone, but then also we've got clinics in Marshalltown, up in Mason City, and now even in Des Moines. Alicia and Alyssa are going to talk next week about our focus on play therapy, how they use really intentional, toys and play in order to connect with young kids and families. So join us next week, 7 o'clock. George, Godspeed. Thank you so much. Blessed to have you as a friend, and safe travels. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Bye, all.